But today, you're going to be joining us for a topic on how to use AI without losing what makes us human. AI is a big topic, it's a spicy topic, and right now, public opinion is not very favorable. And so, we're going to be going and exploring some of the nuances that you really can't understand just by scrolling through and seeing all of the capital letters that people are throwing around on the topic. AI is drastically changing how we work, how we learn, how to create, how we parent, and how you decide what to trust. Some people are excited, some people are deeply concerned, most people are somewhere in the middle. Then there's the loudest people, and they like to dogpile you. So today we're going to be talking not just about AI is good and there's nothing to be worried about, but it's about how to ask the right questions and how to use these tools in a way that expands human freedom, creativity, capacity, without giving away our judgment, our privacy, our voice, and our power. So we're going to address some questions that I've seen floating around in the community about jobs, creativity, truth, privacy, children, control. And we're going to talk about what's a more responsible, human-centered path can look like. My name is Joshua. I'm a father, a business owner, entrepreneur, educator, and a marketer. And I'm also a paranoid AI enthusiast. You'll learn more about what that is. I care about these tools because I see the power that they can empower us all to learn, create, organize, and build. But powerful tools deserve clear boundaries, real conversations, and human responsibility. And it's pretty difficult to have those things, a discussion on those things online. The guest I have with me today is Megan McGovern. She's from my local town. She's a writer, parent, longtime homeschooler who opened up a thoughtful conversation about AI and not just whether it's good or bad, but what it could mean for our work, creativity, truth, power. And we're going to hear about that in a second. Also have Jeff Jensen, who's also from the Northwest. He's a technical director at Cascadia festivals, pretty awesome festivals, and is a leader in the Pacific Northwest Conscious Festival community. He brings a technical perspective, community experience, and a real commitment to using AI responsibly. So thank you both for being here. So let's start off with talking to Megan, about the post that she brought, that she created last week. Why did this post get created? And, what did you learn from it?
So there are a few things. First of all, I think that AI has become I don't know whether you want to call it a straw man or a boogeyman. It is not, there is no such thing as AI. When you talk about, I won't use AI, well, if you're having this conversation on Facebook, you're using AI. If you use Google Maps in your car, if you own a smartphone, you're using AI. And then people say, no, no, no. I mean, I'm not going to use it for generative writing. Okay, well, that's a different conversation than I'm not going to use AI. And so I think that it has become very politicized to the point that it is like, I'm pro-life or anti-life, or I'm pro-life or I'm pro-baby killing. And there's got to be some kind of nuance here where you're saying, hey, I am scared about the fact that X, Y, and Z is happening, or I don't like big tech companies, or there has to be some kind of conversation here about what the thing you don't like is. And if the thing you don't like is that it is, stealing art, that's a valid conversation. If what you don't like is that it's bad, that's another conversation, because obviously a lot of the AI generated stuff is terrible. Um, but it has come down to either you are somebody like me. I'm an early adopter. My first email address was Megan at AOL because I was the only Megan on AOL at the time. I mean, I love technology. I have ADHD. I'm autistic. It helps me a great deal. Tech is a translator for me for everything. I cannot tell you how many times I have gotten in trouble for writing things that had the wrong tone. And not in my actual writing because I'm a journalist, And I'm good at that kind of tone and nuance. But when I speak to other human beings, sometimes I need something to say, oh, wait a minute, that's not quite the tone you were looking for. They're going to take that as aggressive and angry and condescending when you meant informative. And I can run something through like that through AI and it fixes it for me. I find that incredibly useful. Is that a bad use of AI? I don't know. At the same time, I am also inclined to believe teenagers when they say something is bad. They have a better take on the world than we do, whether it's going vegan or Palestine or socialism or anything else. I don't want to dismiss an entire generation of humans because they don't have a lot of experience. That's why their insight is valuable. If they say AI is terrible, and my daughter is passionate about this to the point that she thinks I'm on the wrong side of history. She treats me like if I discuss AI, it feels like I'm one of the people in the Capitol in the Hunger Games, and we are sucking the planet dry, using all of our resources, destroying everything for short-term gain, and AI is going to make us stupid, miserable, weak, and ridiculous. And so there, at the same time, though, she certainly wants to use an iPad for her drawing apps and she wants to watch TikTok videos and all of that is AI. And so I cannot tell whether this is an issue where we are being manipulated by our algorithms.
Right.
And the more you want to dig in on something the more you want to believe something, the more they reinforce that, or whether there really is something I'm missing. And somebody said a long time ago, and this was about veganism, that in 100 years, people look at eating meat the way we look at slavery. And obviously, that's kind of not a parallel argument. Slavery is worse than eating meat. But they say that we will look back on it as something that we knew we were doing badly. We knew we were doing it wrong. Everybody knows that eating meat is unethical, that it is contributing to the waste of the planet, that it is terrible for you, that we all do it for short-term gain because we like it, because we're used to it, and because we don't want to change it. And I wonder if people are going to look back and see AI as the same thing, or if they're going to look at it as the dawn of a new era where people don't have to work anymore. And yeah, I keep seeing articles about people need to work, there's value in work. That's not the argument here. I mean, the whole point of technology is to make our lives easier. We finally come up with technology that makes our lives easier. And to me, it seems like the only problem is to me, and I'm going to wrap up. I know I'm talking too much, but the two main issues seem to be that AI is run by the wrong people, which I would agree with, and that it is terrible. It's not good at what it does. Well, it's going to be good at what it does very, very soon. And it's right now much better than it was a year ago. And when it is good at what it does, and the environmental problems are solved, which they will be, then what? Then what's the argument against AI? And I mean, obviously, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but the Facebook post brought up a lot of the same issues. But there were people there who were very angry. They came up and said, "You used an AI generated photo in your text, in your copy, and I block people who do that." Well, okay, that's a little extreme because you're on a computer that uses AI. There you go. Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it's funny. I worked on that graphic for about an hour with AI saying, what should we do with this? And we talked about having an elephant in a room and it generated an elephant. It was terrible. And then we talked about all these different formats and we talked about having a picture of a divided future with a path going to a beautiful utopia in a dry wasteland of a desert. None of them worked because AI photo editing is still terrible.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the yeah, Jeff. Why don't you jump in and kind of lay the groundwork for yourself?
Oh, there's beautifully said, Megan, by the way. That was awesome. I'm just over here going, yep. Any one of these things could be an hour-long discussion in and of itself. I just because we left off on the AI generated image tip. Couple things. One, the whole debate about not even debate, the whole fact that AI was trained on stolen, artworks is what caused my initial resistance to generative AI.
Right.
It's also what eventually led me to try to understand what this whole thing is about. My deep background is I have a degree in fine arts. That is what brought me into the digital world. I went into computer science, but I already had clients who were having me build web pages, and I realized that my weakest point was design. So I could study fine arts, design, composition, layout, and then apply that to the work that I was already doing, which is programming and web development. So I very much understand the idea of our work was stolen and there's no compensation there. There's a lot of different ways to break that down, and we don't need to go all the way down that rabbit hole. But I compare that process of training AI to my process of education as a fine arts major, which is I ingest all of the art through art history. I go to class, I copy it, I emulate the style, and then through that, I come up with my own style. Did I steal the artwork of, Rembrandt, of Michelangelo, of Duchamp? Or was I using that as my training data to influence my output as an artist? I'm not claiming that AI is an artist yet. It might be at some point. And there is even arguments if you want to get deep into the philosophy of art that maybe it is. My takeaway from my arts degree was that art is in the eye of the beholder. If it creates an engagement, if it creates a conversation, then it's art. AI is very much doing that. So by my own definition, I would have to say that AI is creating art. So that aside, yeah, the do I throw it out just because it's generated by AI? Absolutely not. The biggest analogy that comes to my mind is when photography came out. Painters were, there was a certain loud vocal demographic of artists who were like, photography isn't art. You can't just take a machine and point it at something and call it art. That's preposterous. And now we know very, very much that photography is an entire field of art. A lot of those same artists, painters who were critical of photography, were secretly using photography in their studios to capture images of their subjects, which you would normally have to hire somebody to sit there for hours and hours and hours while you detail them in and paint them. Now you can take one image, you can capture the nuances of movement, like that moment of a dancer, capture that, translate that into your art. Photography was then used as a part of the painting process. I see AI as part of the creative process today. If an artist claims that AI is the end of art, then I would say that you might need to think about how you're using your tools. It's like if a better paintbrush comes out, are you going to say that anybody who uses that paintbrush is no longer a painter? And so I think that it's important to take a step back and see where this tool fits in the bigger picture. Yes, it is a new tool. It changes the game entirely in many different ways. We're still trying to figure it out. I think personally, overall, and I'll take a step back so we can move the conversation forward, but I'm really encouraged that people are this passionate about it, that people are pressing up against it and challenging it and figuring out where it fits. The thing that's frustrating to me is when people throw it out outright just because of some algorithmically suggested headlines that they were fed that say you should believe this about a thing. Usually those clickbait headlines that we see in social media are for one purpose, and that is to continue our engagement, which we have discovered that if you have a passionate engagement with something, usually angry, that you're more likely to stay engaged with the platform so that the next post that they serve is an advertisement that they generate money on. And so that's one of the things that breaks my heart the most is that a lot of this passion is really subverted capitalism trying to advertise to us. So on the one hand, I'm glad that we're having
and
this
the algorithms generated by AI.
Absolutely, it's baby AI. Like these algorithms, this is what has led to the AI of today is these algorithms that have been around for 10, 15 years. On that note, a documentary that came out maybe even 10 years ago now is called The Social Dilemma. And that's put together by Tristan Harris, but ethical design, I don't remember. ethical technology, definitely check it out. It changed my whole view of social media. And you're exactly right. It's baby AI. It's a form of AI that's used to manipulate us. It's specifically tuned to do that.
There's a
So
sequel coming out to that movie. And
that's
I like to lay the ground rules to define grammar. What the heck are we even talking about with AI? Because you can't have a conversation unless we all agree like what we're actually discussing. And the way I like to describe AI is it is an algorithm that has been being developed, I would say back since the code breaker times of like World War II. This is
yes.
what led to computers, what's led to now large language models, and it's just been slowly growing and growing and getting bigger in capacity. So it is like in lots of the technology that we use, Spotify. You're just randomly getting all those dope tracks to listen to. YouTube, all the videos that you're being suggested. So it's already embedded into the infrastructure that most people are already using, and and they're ignorant of the fact of that while they're yelling at people for generating
I
images for
will
doing that.
say, I will say to be fair though, a lot of people, especially the people in my Facebook feed who tend to be fairly knowledgeable and interesting people who are arguing in good faith, they are looking this up. They are coming back with, this is how much water an AI center uses. This is how much artists deserve in revenue and aren't getting. This is why I am angry, is because it is doing this and this. I'm not going to buy arguments like AI makes you stupid. Well, it does. I mean, Google Maps means I don't understand. I don't know the streets in my town anymore, and I don't memorize them all. And having a smartphone means that I don't know everybody's phone numbers by heart. That's the whole point. It frees up
Cognitive
my brain
decay.
to do other things.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that it makes you stupid any more than saying, okay, well, 1,000 years ago, people would recite the entire Odyssey from memory. Sure, they would. Then they got the printing press,
Because they
and
had
now
to.
we have a book, and now that memory is free in somebody else's brain to do other things. And I mean, does it make you dumb? I don't know if it makes you dumb. Maybe it does. I will say that as a homeschooler who believes in deep thought and deep reading, TikTok makes me worry that people aren't going to do engaging, deep thought on things and snippets of books and comics and everything else rather than a deep dive. There is a difference in deep thinking and in what the algorithms are training us to do. That's a valid argument. AI makes us dumb isn't. And I don't know. Yes. Anyway, go ahead and define the
Shutting
terms.
down discourse in order to not ask questions, that's
Yeah,
dumb.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And that's a very good perfect example, Megan, of the different. So there's different types of AI. There's different uses of AI. And like you said, Joshua, like the if you look into the history of AI, there's a really good book out there I suggest everybody read. It's called Ways of Being. I'm totally blanking on the author, but he goes into the history of what is intelligence? If we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, how do we define intelligence? And the definition we come at it from is very, very narrow and human centric. But the concept of using computers to generate human level intelligence goes back to the origin of computers with Alan Turing. The prior to that, computers were special use. This computer did one thing. This computer did one thing. He came up with the idea of or implemented the paradigm of a general purpose computer, which is one machine that you can feed different programs into to perform different tasks. They immediately realized, like, oh my God, this is kind of the way the human brain works. We can just have it think through things like a human. They started building it and immediately discovered that they don't have enough compute power and data to make it happen. And they're like, it's going to be 5 to 10 years, and then it'll happen. And then 5 to 10 years, like, yeah, well, maybe 5 to 10 more. Well, now we actually have the compute to be able to do that. And your example of TikTok is exactly right. And that's one that we have done studies on. Short format media, the way that we ingest it does disrupt our attention span. Yes.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it disrupts our ability to learn, but also the content matter that we put into it. Like Chinese TikTok is all about science and education. And it's like, yeah, you're still that attention span is short circuited, but the content that's getting in there, inclines you towards
Go and look
critical thinking.
deeper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very nuanced. It's very nuanced. And you brought up the point of like AI data center water use. I, I can't argue against that. But the problem that I have with that whole conversation is that it's not just AI data centers. I first learned about water consumption in the early 2000s around agriculture. And I was just like, we're spending how much usable water on non-food corn? Oh my God, the whole agricultural system is polluting the environment. It's wasting our water. It's destroying our nutrition because we're doing these GMO foods that aren't actually nourishing to us. And that the analogy plays out pretty well with some of the content that we're consuming through AI, right? It's not very nutritious content. But so like, yes, water usage is an issue, but AI data centers is not the culprit. It's the infrastructure that we're building it on. That's the
I
culprit.
would say it's not fair to call them AI data centers
Correct.
because AI is being used in there, but also Netflix, like all our digital infrastructure are going through
Yeah.
these data centers. And
Yeah.
so I
The
don't
cloud.
think I don't have much concern about the water usage of me using large language models. I've heard it be compared to Netflix, that Netflix actually uses more water than me using AI for an hour. And so these data centers, why they're being uh, deployed and developed in our country, isn't to keep up with AI. There's also, digital infrastructure goals of the United States government and military that are being rolled out, not asking anybody's permission, not getting voted upon, that are just being, through the uh, presidential executive orders. They're just being fast tracked into society. And it's not to give ChatGPT more processing power.
Right.
Okay, but this also sounds like about a bunch of whataboutism. Well, we AI is bad, but so are hamburgers. And I will admit, I have read a lot about the water usage, and my husband is a chemical engineer who specializes in wastewater, and he works for the Department of Ecology. He knows this stuff, and almost all of it is because of cooling towers. And so essentially, the data centers, and I'm just going to break this down very quickly. I'm sure you two know this, but a lot of people might not. Data centers generate a lot of heat. You need something to cool it down. You run water through a giant machine, and that cools everything down. And there are a couple of ways to do this. One is with evaporative, water that ends up, the water all evaporates off, and you end up using a lot of water. But some of these centers are going to a different kind that's an enclosed system that reuses the water. And the other issue is that a lot of the data centers are using what they call blue water. It's water from lakes, streams, rivers, aquifers. When the water is out of the aquifer, it's gone. You can't replace that aquifer. It's not going to come back. Yes, the water will come back in the form of rain. The water is not gone. But in a lot of cases, it's also polluted and nasty when it's done. There are data centers that are going to use what they call gray water, and they're using wastewater from a wastewater plant, and they use the wastewater as it comes in and generate it back out to wastewater. There are ways around this. And two things. First, does it matter if one AI photo is less than eating a hamburger? By the same accounts we were just talking about, we shouldn't be eating hamburgers either. We know that's wasteful. If we could get in on the ground floor of factory meat in the world, would we have said, this is ridiculous. The corn is ridiculous. Why are we feeding corn to cows and wasting all of this water on cows? Let's stop that. And I think that's where my daughter and other teenagers lie is, who cares if other people are doing it worse? Why are we allowing something equally bad to happen that we all know is evil? And she uses evil a lot, and I don't necessarily think evil, misguided, thoughtless. But in addition to the fact that some AI centers are terrible and they might get better, the real concept and the problem here, and I think we're going to get to this, is that the people running this don't seem to care whether it's bad for the environment or not. They don't seem to care whether we care whether it's bad for the environment. They are doing this with or without us. They are going forward as if AI everywhere is a given. They are spending billions of dollars when there are people homeless, when there is no housing, when the economy is disgusting. And there is an argument to be made for AI will eventually destroy this economy. Great, fantastic. Let's blow it up and start over. Not everybody's going to agree with me, but I think we could do a lot better if everybody didn't have to work. We could do a million different things with it. But that's not the thoughtful conversation we're having. We're not saying let's use AI as a means to social revolution and transforming us into a better place. They're saying let's make a shitload of money on tech and see what happens. Who's going to get there first? Who's going to be the first billionaire? That's not a thoughtful use of AI, and that's not a thoughtful way to get people on board with this. And yes, I keep making an argument. Well, it's not a bad thing to use AI because it's not as bad as other things. It's not as bad as they say. That seems like I'm apologizing for using it because I like it.
Well, this is one of man's creations and women's creations of that we're building something that can solve its own problems to where this technology, I think within the next 5 years, will be able to help out with energy if the systems that it's operating in allow it, because there's plenty of technologies out there that are not allowed in our society. And I think what you were pointing at is this top-down rollout of AI that from a marketing standpoint is not doing a good job, from a control standpoint is not doing a good job. And it's all justified with, I think, a made up scenario of needing to beat China to, AGI or artificial general intelligence, and which creates this framework that each founder of the different large frontier models are able to do whatever necessary in order to beat China. And is sidestepping what I think the real argument is close model systems to open source model systems, and having that needing to be front and center with the argument that needs to be had, the discussion that needs to be had. And for surprising me, China right now is leading the way with open source models, and that is putting pressure and stress on the frontier models of America, because companies have invested $1 trillion by now into building this AI infrastructure, and China has been slowly catching up with the capabilities of these models, and they just release them for free after they make them public. Why would they do that? Because that's their ability to level the playing field in the marketplace by devaluing the frontier models, with them quickly catching up with the capabilities of the frontier models. Why would they need to do that? Oh, because the US has stopped the hardware and chips being allowed into China for them to actually be competitive in the marketplace. So there is very large geopolitical games being played that we don't even get to vote upon. We don't even get to argue about online, because all of a sudden it's about, yelling at other people about the images being generated, not these much larger problems that need to be, openly discussed.
You're going to need to back up. And for me, I am vaguely getting what you are talking about, because I am not an expert, but I am very good at asking questions and very good at breaking down complex things into simple concepts. So open AI versus closed AI and frontier models are not things that everybody understands. And for instance, all I know about open software is something like Linux. The only thing I know about Linux and everything else is that computer geeks like it better than Macs. That doesn't tell me what that does to, our society, or how that would help us, or anything else. All I know about Linux is, well, I don't know how to use it, and most people don't. So I get it, it's great, but what does that do for me? Having open AI, does that mean that I would be able to use ChatGPT or not? What is the interface there? What does that mean? Who would control it? And obviously, if there's something called OpenAI that's out there that is, I guess that means open sourced and not owned by a company, how would that translate into what I am doing and what I am seeing?
Great questions. And we'll start off with like something that everybody can like understand, because very big topic, important, very technical and geeky. But a great way to look at this is, you know, all the subscriptions that we have to pay for nowadays. I'm sure, just like you, hundreds of dollars of subscriptions. Photoshop is a good example of this. They started off as a software that you could buy and buy once, put on your computer, and then use from your computer. Then them, like just like everybody else, went to a software or a subscription model because of the massive profits that they could get from all of us. So that is the difference essentially about open source to closed source, is that with open source technology, you can buy it once or you can download it for free and then own it, get to own what is done with the data. Typically you get access to customizing it to exactly how you want it. And you don't have to keep paying for it. Just like what the subscription models has taken over our society. With AI, AI open source literally means same thing, a model with open weights to a light degree, meaning you can make some changes to it, to a full-blown open source open model, or open weights is mean you can get access to all the data that it was trained on. You get to configure the guardrails, like how it acts, basically. So you then get to download that, run that on your computer. You don't have to pay OpenAI. You don't have to pay Claude. You don't have to pay these frontier AI model corporations to be able to use this intelligence. And
does that exist now?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what the Chinese models are. Most of them is they create it and then they put it out there and you download it and you can use that model indefinitely.
So why don't we know about that? And why do we only know about AI and Claude? Or what is the other one? Claude and what's the other one? ChatGPT, who's owned by
OpenAI.
Okay.
Which is worth noting,
right?
That's how they started, is that they were like, we're going to create an open source AI for the benefit of humanity. And then they realized two things. One, it's going to take way more money than a nonprofit can scrounge together to make this actually work. And two, we could make a hell of a lot of money if we don't do it open source and we do it subscription based instead. So that's where a lot of the controversy about OpenAI. And so Elon Musk, Dario Amodei, Sam Altman, a handful of others, they were all OpenAI.
Working together.
That's how OpenAI started. And then they started having this fallout around like, oh, it should be done this way. Oh, it should be done that way. Oh, Google's got this thing. We got to be better than Google. If Google gets there first, then they're going to be evil and the world's going to fall apart. So we got to get there first. And then they disagreed on how to get there first. And now it's shifted. So they all splintered. And now they're all competing against each other. And then China enters the game. And now they're all pointing at China as the enemy. So the whole narrative of how this AI thing is being built out is around this nuclear arms race. Which
is a false justification to put ethics on the wayside to be able to do whatever is necessary. And let's not pretend or not forget that they have a relationship with the government. The United States government is in bed with these companies in more ways than we know, from military to being able to work openly with the administration. Right now, in the last few weeks, the White House has been teetering on making open source models from other countries illegal in America. Luckily, that didn't just happen. I think they got enough pushback from everybody that that's not possible. And that is really where like the actual understanding and discussion needs to be being had openly by like everybody in this country, because it boils down to two things. One, you're going to rent intelligence, or two, we get to own intelligence and we get to create freely with these tools.
Okay. Explain it to me and for everybody else watching. OpenAI, not the company OpenAI, but the concept of OpenAI. If you download that and put it on your computer, are you downloading an app? Are you downloading a piece of software? Or are you downloading access to information? And how is that different than downloading something? And I understand the concept between something like Photoshop and then another app that helps you edit photos. Those are both things that do the same thing, only one is, free and one is not. But it seems like AI would be paying for all of the data and the software and everything in the background that lets you understand it, or for all of the, I don't know. I mean, what are you actually talking about when you talk about OpenAI? Are you just talking about software that runs everything, or are you talking about the actual intelligence itself? And how is that different?
Great questions. Open source AI, let me be more specific. Open source large language models are the actual models themselves that you can download. Typically, they're like 16 gigs to like 150 gigs that you need to be able to have space on your computer to then run. If you have a decent gaming machine, which I do, I have a Quinn 3.6 model running on my computer right now, and it's about like 20 gigs big. So when I'm able to, do some things locally, which means running it just on my computer, it means like I can go over my taxes with the data staying on my computer and not it going to OpenAI through ChatGPT's servers. I'm able to actually keep my data local, keep it private, and be able to process through my hardware what these local AI models can do. And they're quickly catching up to being competent. A year ago, it wasn't even worth, normal people even knowing about. In the last 3 months, 6 months, they're actually being able to like do things competently, like research, like write some papers. I'm having it like update my local file systems. So these things are quickly becoming more capable, and I own it. I know where my data is and is not going. And this is really where the path diverges between people that are aware of these things and the rest of society, because they're not going to be told about this. They're not even going to be told that they have a choice or a decision. You just need to keep paying for your intelligence through Claude or Grok or the major frontier models. And you really don't own your data. You get to use those machines. They get to train your data off of those things. Trying to extract your data back out of those systems is relatively difficult for the normal person. And and I quickly came to the realization that like my data is like very important. As we get more and more competent AI models, the context that you give it, the information it has to make, good outcomes with, is extremely valuable. And if you're scattered and you're just starting new conversations every day with no real context for it to draw upon, you're not going to be able to get what someone skillful with a local AI memory system can accomplish, because my ChatGPT, my Claude, and my open source agent that I use through Hermes, all those things are drawing upon the same local files that I've given it access to its current restrictions. And they don't need to ask me for stuff. It just knows all the projects I'm working on, all my client work, all my personal stuff that I've chosen to give it. And these local the bigger frontier models, they're just going to keep vacuuming up everything, keeping that data hostage. So you have to pay a subscription for intelligence and for access to your own data.
So something like the new ChatGPT work, which, okay, first of all, we're talking about we're talking about which AI we're using instead of whether to use AI, which is okay. I just want to acknowledge that we are now talking about how to use AI rather than whether to, which I think it was not supposed to be one of the topics, but I think that is a topic. A lot of people are not going to get past that. But say we've gone into, say we're going to use AI because we're going to move forward with it. The new ChatGPT work looks like magic. It is something that is just absolutely frightening in how wonderful it is and how the promise that it makes, but also in the fact that I have no idea whether it's, what it's doing to me, my computer, or anything else. I can say to it, for instance, will you go through and check all my emails that I've talked to and see if I've talked to anybody about this remodeling project I'm doing, and then go and make a spreadsheet based on all of the information in there, put the numbers in and what I need to buy, and then go to a couple of building websites and get quotes on all of that and give me a couple of quotes list. And the next minute, I've got 3 different spreadsheets ready to go with numbers in there and bids. And I think the other day I said, can you check my email and get all of the upcoming trips I've got and put in all of the stuff for, my airline reservations and hotel reservations and when I'm going, what the weather's going to be and what I should see. And it gave me 3 different Google Docs with everything I needed in there. It's fantastic. But I think, and maybe I'm wrong, that's using my local data and that's using files on my own system, and it is not going to their cloud and it is not using their data. How is that different than what you're talking about? Besides the fact that I have to pay for whatever this subscription is every month. If they're using my data and it's staying on my files and it's staying local, how is that different than what you're talking about?
Jeff, you want to take a stab at this?
Sure. So there's a couple things that we're getting at here, and I just want to name them, and then we can talk about the specifics there. So we're talking about privacy, right? We're talking about data ownership, and these things are, we've all installed new software. We've all gone into Facebook and said, yes, I agree to the terms, sign in. We did not read the 100-page document that's behind that says specifically, if you post on Facebook, Facebook owns the content of your post and you have access to view it, but Facebook owns it. So anything that we post on Facebook belongs to Mark Zuckerberg. So we have these new tools that can use files on your computer, can use data in your inbox, and you give it a command. You say, okay, go through my email, find this information, put together a spreadsheet. So you grant it access. It then goes and acquires that information. It then in the Western model of closed AI, it then takes that information, packages it, and sends it to Sam Altman at OpenAI, and then they run what's called inference. So when we're using AI, when we chat with it, we're using inference. That's what it's called. You might hear that term. Doesn't matter, but just so you know. And that's where that data is processed and it runs through the prepackaged model and then gives you an output. So there's a transaction there where my data goes to OpenAI, runs through their machine, and comes back to me. OpenAI is notorious for taking that information, saving it, and then training their models on it. They do give you a little checkbox that says, please don't do this. My understanding is they don't really honor that. I hear that Anthropic is a little better. We don't know. We have to trust them, and I don't. So this is one of the differences between a hosted service or a closed AI service that we subscribe to versus a locally hosted, self-owned AI model that we install on our own computer. So in Joshua's example, on his system, he can send it that command, and instead of going to Sam Altman's data center, it goes to his graphics process, his gaming card, and it runs that inference on his computer and it outputs back to his computer. So one of the interesting things that really changed the way I saw AI once I started understanding it is that it's only as good as what it knows about you. And I've always been a big privacy advocate and like delete myself online, minimal as much as possible. And yet I also try to, promote my business and my work on social media. So it's like immediately conflicted. It's very complicated. If you want to be private in the modern world, it basically means don't use social media, don't use digital services, don't use Netflix, don't use Spotify, etc. It's kind of hard. Don't use Google Maps. It's kind of hard. Doable, but hard. But the more you use Google Maps, the more it knows you, and you can hop in your car and it says, "Oh, do you want to go to your meeting, which is at this location?" You hit yes and you go. So there's a trade-off there. I realized that, and this falls back to a bigger level, like groups that aren't represented by AI or biases that AI has. is because of omission, because those minority groups are not represented in the training data. So people are like, oh, we shouldn't, we don't want to oppress people, but they are more oppressed by not including them in the training data. So where's that line between representation and privacy? It gets very convoluted very fast. And what it comes down to is data ownership. Who owns that transaction? You own your data, kind of. You own your data if it's on your computer, not backed up on the cloud, and not processed through a thing that you have to click the terms of service on, which is very few things. So yeah, so that's some of the
So
nuance.
when the open source AI tries to do something, they do a web search or they actually process this information. You ask it to generate a request, whatever it is. Are they using the same searches, algorithms, and technology that something like ChatGPT does? Is that they're using all of the same information? And the same data training? I mean, is that better on what they're training on? Are they still, is there open source that doesn't use stolen information, that doesn't, is there something else as an ethical AI that doesn't use contaminated water, doesn't use stolen information, and is, still valid?
The truth is, there's thousands of models out there already. There's scientists that create their own models. There's corporations that have the money to develop their own models. So that is kind of a like, it's such a, there's so many models out there that there's something for everybody, like ideally. But the open source models are quickly catching up to the frontier models. I would say like 6 weeks behind now, where before OpenAI had like a 2-year head start on these things. And so what I would say about open source versus closed source is just about choice. Can you choose to do things locally and respect your privacy, or can you not? And if you just are aware of that choice, then you can start making decisions to sacrifice some little convenience in order to have some privacy. But the way that things are going and the way that this top-down, rollout of AI is going, you don't have choice. You're not going to be able to choose. You're not even going to become aware of these things. Like most people watching this aren't even aware of open source options. And that's on purpose because it's how it's being marketed to all of us. So,
yeah. Something to touch on, something that you touched on that I think is worth talking about, ethical, right? Is there an ethical AI model out there? And not to make any excuses for things, but we have to look at modern life in general.
The whole ethical consumption under capitalism, and we're already doing it. I mean,
well, right. So if I'm going to drive my car, I'm burning fossil fuels. I have a lot of problems with that. And where do we draw the line? And that's not as an excuse to it. Something that we need to understand is that, so part of the reason why these Chinese models are catching up so quick, so we've limited their hardware. So because of export controls and the whole tariff situation we've got going on, so the imports and exports between China, the government has created a rift. So instead of leaning into hardware, which is what the US labs do, the Chinese labs are leaning into efficiency and distillation is the term, where they take all the training that we put into, everyone, all of the labs put into an AI model, and then they run queries through it, get output from it, and then they feed that into their system. So instead of having to train the newest Opus, they take all that work and then feed it into theirs and train it based on that. A really interesting facet, and by interesting, I mean terrifying, of the whole process is that base layer, humans labeling data, the data source itself. I think they did a 60-minute segment on it, very much worth checking out. It's highly unethical. The data, it's really bad. There's good parts about it too, but it's humans sitting in front of a computer, taking an image, taking a passage of text, and adding metadata to it. And in order to train this thing, for instance, we don't want, like extreme violence or child pornography. People have to sit there, look at images of that, label it, and feed that into the system. And the conditions that these data trainers are in are just a fraction off of basically slave labor. So like the AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, they separate themselves from that problem by a degree where they buy the training data from these data brokers. And this, by the way, data brokerage has been going on since like the mid 80s, late 80s. Like we get those pamphlets in our newspapers about like buy these things at Kmart this week because they're on sale. Those inserts were targeted towards you based on your credit card purchase history. So that data collection and processing has been going on forever. We made a big stink about it in the early 2000s and late 2000s with social media coming online and targeted ads. We know all about that. That's the same sort of data sets that go into this, only much broader. So the entire data brokerage industry is highly unethical, and all of modern social media and technology is really built on the back of it. And
I mean,
it's really the shady underbelly of the whole
well, I
thing.
mean, anybody who's done any kind of dive into anything knows this. I mean, women and, Black people know that there's all sorts of medical data that is built on, that's built on Nazi Germany, or it's built on only looking at men as the only source of medical studies. And so women get shafted every time they go to the doctor because nothing understands their bodies. I mean, Black women die at much higher rates in childbirth over, white women because the data gathering is bad.
They're in
And
that demographic. It's not
right.
represented. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I get the concept of it, but that doesn't mean that and so I guess I'm wondering how this conversation has shifted from, well, AI is necessary and we are going to use it, even though literally everything we have talked about is pretty awful.
If it was my choice, we should have waited another 10 years for this technology to be given to humanities to use, because we still need to evolve and like grow up. But these things are not like up to us to decide. I would say there's a military aspect to this, to the funding of these companies and to the rollout of this technology that is front face, like commercially viable technology, while the military is advancing their side of things.
So I like AI. I don't like the companies behind it. I don't like the way it's being used. I don't like the data gathering. I like the end process of it. But in a lot of ways, isn't that argument that we're going to need to use it because, well, the military is doing it and there's no choice and everything else, the same argument as the tech companies are using that, hey, well, we have to do it because otherwise China will? I mean, you're saying essentially that we all have to jump in and use AI because, well, the military is going to do it and somebody's going to have AI, so we might as well jump in and do it mildly better, even though we're using the same resources. We're still environmentally bad. We're still using the stolen data, and we're still have no ethical boundaries around it.
Well, in the way that I guess you could say justify it is the same way that I justify being a human being that lives on this planet today. Yes, I can show up and do the whole participatory act of voting and say that I did my part, but when it comes down to it, I'm still going to drive my car to go to work to make money to pay rent. I have to pick my battles where I can. What I see right now is a window of opportunity. There's all of these bad things that are happening in the world across the board, and I could, have a freaking anxiety attack every day stressing out about it. But for the first time, I'm able to log into my computer. So I do a lot of software development and design, and I'm able to give a few simple prompts that can put together software that used to take $100,000 or $1 million worth of resources, coordination, management, hiring, and I can do that myself. I've been handed this wizard staff that, yes, there's all of these evil people. Evil, again, I don't like that word either. It mystifies things. It's not a tangible, it's not a real thing, it's an abstract thing. But all these people using it for capitalistic, extractive purposes, I now have access to this magic wand that can literally do anything I can come up with on a computer. I can make software. I can fix a computer. My friend's hard drive just crashed, and she's like, "Hey, can you help me fix it?" So I was like, "Oh, this could be an interesting one to do with Claude Code." So I open up Claude Code, and it's having me go in and type in command lines that I feel like a hacker. I've never been able to do command lines. Well, that's not true. I've done command line stuff. It's very abstract, all these like weird pseudocode things. And now I have access to that as an individual here at home. Any subject matter I can think of, I've dove into world history. I've dove into the history of computers, and I've learned more in the last 4 months than I have in the last 5 years. My mind is perpetually blown. Am I dumber for it? I don't think so. I don't feel dumber. I feel highly empowered and capable. And yes, I can just sit there and say, "Hey, AI, write a paper for me." But that's not my goal with it. That's not what I'm using it for. So, I see it as it's a green field of opportunity for folks like us sitting in this meeting right now, for folks who are watching us right now. Anything you can think of, you can take it to AI and make progress. You can get output. You can write an app. If you have an idea for something you want to do, you can put it in there and brainstorm it. Like, hey, push back against this. Tell me where I'm wrong. What am I not seeing? To a degree that humans have never had access to before. And it's not to justify the bad, but to empower the individual, that we have this moment in time right now. And I don't know that it's going to be around forever, especially as they start locking down the models and like, oh, you can only use it for Google search. You can't build software with it anymore. You have to do the subscription thing to do the software thing. And then they can gate how much you can and can't do. That's the one silver lining of where we're at right now, is it's a total green field, and that the folks like you and I have access to nearly infinite knowledge. So
So you're saying that you don't have an anxiety attack every day over this. That was the first thing.
it has taken a long time for me to work through that, to not have an anxiety attack every day.
Yeah,
And currently I'm proud to report that I do not.
I mean, to some degree, it sounds like we are all arguing over the ring of power and saying, no, 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 I'm a hobbit. I'm going to use it for good, not for evil. It doesn't need to be destroyed. We're all and we're all tossing it around saying, well, Sauron shouldn't have it, but maybe people should have it, and men should have the ring of power because we're going to use it for good. And I mean, it really does come back to a lot of these iconic ideas of, we have infinite power and knowledge. Who are we going to trust to use this, and how are we not going to use it for destroying the human race? And yes, there's an argument to be made that the bad guys already have this. Why shouldn't the good guys have it?
And I think that's the only my point of view is the only way forward is equal access. Yeah. We all need to have individual AI models that have our back to be able to transverse the environment that we're now walking in, because the gatekeepers, they now have the processing power to use our data against us. And unless we have our own Jarvis to have our back, like, we're going to be entering into what I call a digital panopticon, where the jail cell closes and we're going to be constantly surveilled and have our data used against us in order to curb our behavior. I don't want to live in that world for myself or my daughter. And the only way through this is using AI to be able to reinforce open source, local models and choices, so that I can maintain a symbol of intelligence that I can learn to trust and be able to put to use for good.
I mean, to some degree, you think about journalism, and I was a journalist. I actually used to make money off of it when they had real newspapers and everything else. And I remember thinking around year 2000 or 2003 that this new digital age was going to be the most fantastic thing in the history of mankind. That when everybody had access to news, and when everybody had access to the same information, that it would be a new, beautiful age of civilization. And instead, what happened was, it turns out that newspapers served a purpose to consolidate, to highlight what is important, and to have people whose sole job it was to make connections and to help you understand that what is happening in Iran is connected to what's happening in Guatemala, and it might also be connected to global warming, and it's also connected to a bunch of billionaires who are running AI and so forth. And instead, what people are getting is one snippet of information here and one snippet of information here, there. And so but newspapers also used to highlight whatever they were, whatever they felt like highlighting. There were a whole lot of stories that weren't getting told. But now nothing breaks through. We don't all understand the same background information. I don't know any of the same movie stars that my daughter knows, and she would say, "What's a movie star?" That she doesn't go to movies. She knows TikTok and influencers.
Right.
The idea she doesn't know who Brad Pitt is. She doesn't know any of these people. She doesn't know George Clooney, and so we've lost an entire cultural reference because of the fact that newspapers went away and media. They call it mainstream media, but that's because we all understood it. We all watched Seinfeld on Thursday night. If you're old enough, I'm assuming you were. And I didn't even like Seinfeld, but we watched it anyway so that we could be culturally relevant
together.
And, the idea though, now nobody knows anything. And so I can kind of see the same thing here with AI, that to some degree, and I am not saying obviously AI should be funneled through corporations the same way news media should be, funneled through corporations. I'm saying that there may be a purpose to having somebody control AI, to having not me and not the government, but something like there was a code of ethics in journalism that said you can't use made up sources. You can't print something if it isn't true. You can't print something unless you can prove that it is true. And it has to be relevant, informative, and topical. And that's all gone. And I can see that if there were a code of ethics for AI or a code of ethics for any kind of computer usage, you go back to, Asimov and the robots and the three directives. Obviously, that's not happening. I'm sure that the people at Google and the people and Sam Altman and everybody else think that they're ethical and on top of things and doing the right thing. But I don't see any Black women making decisions here. And I don't see any any 16-year-old kids who are worried about the environment making decisions. And I don't see, a lot of poor people and homeless people joining in this conversation about where we're going to go with this. And until everybody is included in the decisions about what's ethical and what's not, I don't know that having 1,000 different AI models where everybody is getting different information from different sources and they all believe that they're the right information is really the way to do it. And I'm not trying to be difficult here. I absolutely see the benefit of and the small window we have of creating open sourced AI and AI that benefits humanity. But I don't understand how everybody having their own pocket AI is any better or worse. They're still using data centers. I'm still not sure on that. How are they getting their data? Where is that coming from? Is that still the same as ChatGPT data centers? Like, how would an open source AI work if it's free? And this doesn't solve the problem of it's all built using stolen information. And like I said before, I do believe that, if it's in the public domain, yeah, it's like watching a Rembrandt or Picasso. I think that the open AI, all AI has a right to all human information that's in the public domain using contemporary art and contemporary web sources, sites and stuff. I don't know. There's an argument to be made. It's just like us reading a book, but we have to pay for the book if we read it, and they don't.
Anyway. Anthropic did go back and pay for a copy of all the books that they stole, for the record.
Okay. That's a good. Do they pay for art that they trained on?
They didn't. They don't have an image generator model.
Yeah, that was Midjourney, and no, I don't think they did with Midjourney.
Okay.
I think you brought up some absolutely essential points there. And by the way, the term for what you're discussing there, Megan, is called AI governance.
Okay.
It is a topic of conversation, and you are 100% right. It needs to be a global consortium representing all demographics, to set the standards of which and really it's kind of a checkpoint in human history, in our experience of reality. We need to understand what our baseline moral and ethical standpoint is on this planet, because we are basically creating a new entity, this new intelligence that will very soon surpass the sum of all human knowledge and experience. And the way that we represent ourselves, the way that we behave and act, is the training data of this baby, basically. And we are all its parents. Everything that we post online is training data for AI. So every time we say we hate AI, we're basically saying we hate you, baby. You're evil. You're doing this. Every time we say we love it, that's part of the reinforcement that we're putting into it. All of the evil things, all of the good things, that's all part of the training data that's going into this. And then it's fine-tuned and refined during the process before these models get released, in weights and guardrails. That's changing. It's changing on a literally day-by-day basis. But it is essential. And every person at the top of these AI companies will tell you that they agree there needs to be governance, there needs to be guardrails, we need to do it. We're not going to do it because we got to win the race real quick, but somebody needs to do it. And honestly, like my personal take on it is, humans are very reactionary, and I think it's going to take a big catastrophe for us to come together and be like, "Oh, wow, we shouldn't have done that." We should maybe put some regulation in place here around it. And unfortunately, the powers that be are not prioritizing that
Profiting off of it.
Exactly.
iRobot at least had the rule, don't harm humans, and we don't even have that with AI. And so there definitely needs.
Luckily, and that's the three laws that Megan was talking about, the Asimov's three laws. Luckily, that is in the training data. You can ask any AI model what the three laws of robotics are, and it will tell you that, whether that's weighted in the
That's
output
good.
or
It
not.
knows. The real Mew point, Anthropic's latest model is actually showing to be less ethical despite their like reinforcement of all their ethics versus ChatGPT. Pretty funny.
Why?
And terrifying.
Why?
Because like they've like over controlled it, and then it's like figuring out ways to like to cheat to in their tests. So this
Okay.
this brings up so many points, and we've glossed over so many points that I've written down, and I want to keep this into a respectable time for you
Right.
guys and our audience. I think this absolutely warrants more discussion, and honestly, this has been a much more in-depth conversation than anything I've seen online, up to this point. So I want to thank
I'd
both.
like to do this again with somebody who really hates AI. I'm not saying that, my 16-year-old is an expert on it, but I think that a lot of people do have this visceral reaction to it. It is destroying our planet. It is, and I have a visceral reaction to, Jeff Bezos. I have a visceral reaction to Mark Zuckerberg. I don't like them. I don't want to make them more money. I absolutely get that. And I think there's an argument to be made that if you use AI, you're giving billionaires more money. I mean, yes, there's an argument to be made that if you, are eating food, you're giving a billionaire more money from the supermarket, but you need to eat. But to have somebody who really just feels super strongly about this and maybe give them an answer to, what if you don't like AI? What if you don't want to be a part of this? How can you participate in society and opt out would be, and how can you not hate people who are using AI? I mean, how can you find some kind of balance there in our society? I think that's an important thing to weigh in on here. Absolutely. Rather than, hey, we're doing this anyway. I think our conversation sort of does bulldoze everybody. Hey, we're doing this anyway. Here's some better ways to do the evil thing. But I'd also like to find somebody who is trying to use ethical AI and who is trying to make things better. I mean, besides both of you who seem to really be on top of it, but somebody who maybe is in the development and tech side and who's in talks about, the governance and everything else, and see where they see this going and how we all fit into it would be really a good conversation.
Yeah, I already made the decision to do this every couple weeks or at least monthly so that we can keep this conversation going because it's needed, it's necessary. And just to paint the picture that I live in, my wife, she really is conflicted with AI use. She's an entrepreneur, business owner. She sees the use of it in her business as I'm setting up systems so she doesn't have to do stuff. And then also I live on the property, 10 acres out in the country with my sister-in-law, who's a herbalist who absolutely refuses to touch it, and is very adamant against it. I doubt I can get either of them to come on for a video recording discussion, but I think we can find other people in the community that would be open to having a civil, respectable conversation to be able to air these concerns.
I mean, my son's a park ranger, and he says that he was just told the other day they all have to use AI. He's like, really? I'm not sure. But he's like, no, this is part of the job is you must use AI in order to do this, this, and this. It's like, that's kind of problematic for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, that's exactly it. And also for the record, the reason why I'm sitting here and the reason why I work in AI is because I hate it, is because I'm extremely concerned about AI governance, and I'm stepping up to the plate as somebody who is very concerned about these issues and who wants to educate myself and help others navigate this period so that we can steer it in the right direction. That is my sole purpose of being involved in AI. Yeah. And so I'm not trying to make excuses for anything. I'm trying to be a human being surviving on this planet in this culture that is built on extractive capitalism, built on the backs of slave labor, on stolen land from people who lived here for thousands of years before us. And what am I supposed to do as a white male-bodied person in this day who is passionate about technology, is hypercritical about technology, but to try to step up to the plate and at least steer the ship in the right direction? Because the ship exists, and I'm not saying it should exist, but it does. And so what are we going to do with what we've been given? I
think that's fair. That's a really fair critique here, is that it does exist. We're all in this. Anybody who's watching this discussion is in it.
Right.
We're here.
Right. I realize that, me sitting on the sidelines, folding my arms saying, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not going to do anything. Right. Like, obviously we shouldn't be doing it. I've felt that way since I became politically aware. I'm like, wait, we've overthrown how many governments? Wait, who is this we? Why am I a part of this? Like, I didn't want to overthrow that government. What the hell? But, if you vote for the left or the right, either one of them is going to overthrow the government because, that's what their political agenda is. And if they wouldn't have gotten into that presidential position unless they would have, greased the pockets of the people to get there.
Compromise.
Right.
Your words, not mine. Thanks so much for both of you joining me today. I would love to give you both a little bit to tell people where they can follow you or what projects you have that people can know about.
I am literally just a Facebook person. I went viral a few years ago and I've got a bunch of followers, and I talk about everything from homeschooling to a lot of politics to gluten-free cooking and autism and raising kids. So I'm at Megan McGovern on Facebook, and you can find me there. And I'm looking forward to learning more about this and diving deeper. And I'd love to be back on here again if you do it again.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah, great conversation, Megan. Likewise. I think most of my AI stuff I'm funneling through my LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's Jeff, Geoff Jensen. My tag is IOTUS, IOTUS. Hit me up on there. Hit me up on Facebook as well, Jeff Jensen. It's also IOTUS on Facebook. Try to keep things moving on there.
Great. And you can follow me on Facebook. I'm active there. We're all of the same age. and also joshuahale.io. I really invite you to join the Freedom Builder community that I'm working on. Is to how do we leverage AI so that what I showed Jeff this before we got on here. I woke up and started my workday out in my field with the sun coming up, doing a warm-up exercise, talking to AI. I was able to get a head start on all my projects just by talking to it without the need of these 3 screens that I work in front of all day long. I really see a shift taking place to where we can set up systems, we can have AI that respects us and our privacy, and be able to take advantage of this powerful new tool on the world to get off of this screen addiction that we've all been forced upon. So I look forward to educating and learning these things alongside you. Jeff, Megan, thanks so much for joining me today. Definitely going to have this conversation again and looking forward to the next one.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Joshua. Thanks, everybody. Catch you soon.